Hello, Mr. Brian. How are you today?
Do- Doing good, nervous. How is everyone? Morning. I'm Mr. Sharma. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Steve.
Hello, Mr. Steve. Hope everybody has had their breakfast, their tea, coffee.
Yep.
I have mine right here, my strawberry tea.
Wow. What did everyone else in the audience get for their breakfast?
Maybe someone got nasi lemak and I will live through you.
Waiting for the delivery from help.
Wow. I'll put my address in the comments. You can just send it over to me.
All right, so it's 11:05, so I think we can start with the introductions. So first of all, hello and welcome to everybody who is taking part in this webinar, and especially thank you to you speakers for being a part of this webinar. It's an honor to have you here. So this webinar is about the future of work. So we are focusing on the skills that are necessary for the new workplace. So in the past few years, the future of work has changed quite drastically. And with this change, many people who are in the working world currently are wondering what new skills they will need to learn and develop so that they can keep up with the new trends. And those that have not even started working yet are also having this question in their mind about what the essential skills are that they would need to be successful in this world of work. So this webinar is going to cover the essential skills that one needs to have in this new world of work. And it also briefly touches on the topic of the fourth industrial revolution, which we are going through right now. So first of all, I would like to start with introductions. So I'll start with myself. Hi, I'm Ambika. I work at Career Sense as an admin, and I will be moderating this webinar today. Hi, Mr. Brian. How are you today?
I'm doing great today. Thank you, Ambika. My name is
Can you give
Brian.
a brief introduction of yourself to the
Sure.
participants?
All right, guys. My name is Brian. I work at Bila Retail as the Human Resource Recruitment Executive. A little bit of an oddball in here, but I think I can provide some other perspective into the working world. All right. As a fresh graduate, I'm quite a fresh graduate as well. All right.
I am too. I graduated just last year. I'm quite fresh as well. I consider myself quite fresh as well. Hi, Mr. Sharma. How are you?
I'm good. I'm very well. Thank you. So yeah, first of all, thank you very much for having me here. It seems like I'm the old man here. Very rarely this is the case, but we'll take it as it goes. Yes. So yeah, I have the privilege of having to run Ascendo. Ascendo is a behavioral science-based technology company focusing on talent intelligence. So we develop our own platform and so on. So we've been around for about 14 years now. We're a Malaysian company and we do work internationally.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Sharma, for that introduction. And you're not that old. Old is also gold, so it's fine. Hi, Mr. Steve. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks, Abhika. Yeah, thanks for
Can you
inviting
give
us.
me
Yeah, thanks for inviting myself to this career talk. Let me just quickly introduce myself. I am a IT graduate and I have been working for like 15 years. So I think it's not that old, but it's also not that young. Yeah, so I have been working in IT a lot more focusing on IT consulting. And in fact, it's a HR IT consulting, like HR technology consulting. Yeah, so for the past, I think 13 years I've been doing that. So I have 15 years working experience, but 13 years I've been focusing on HR technology consulting.
I think Steve's company and Ascendo does work together as well.
Yeah, we are kind of like competitor, but also friends. Yeah, I work with some of your team members like Chris Yao, Sopit or something like that. Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with a little healthy competition.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
All right, so I guess we'll just kickstart this off with maybe an icebreaker question just to ease us into this webinar. So my question to you is, could you tell all of us a fun fact about yourself? So I'll go first. A fun fact about me is that I own a dog that is not really a dog. I am very convinced that my dog is 1/4 a horse, 1/4 a rabbit, 1/4 a lizard, and 1/4 a dog. Yep.
Why
So
so?
that is a fun
Yeah,
fact about myself. How about you, Mr. Sharma? Why don't you go first?
I don't own a dog that looks like a horse or um, but yeah, trying to pretend that I'm not so old, I still vehemently collect lots and lots and lots of sneakers. And something that's odd about me. So when I was in school, never really studied, right? So now I'm really trying to get up to speed with astrophysics. So astrophysics is something that really interests me now. Weird, very weird. So nothing to do what I do on a daily basis, but I really love learning about the stars, the moons, not to learn horoscopes or anything, but so I really like listening to a chap, and I suggest all of you should go ahead and do this. There's an orator called Neil deGrasse Tyson. At least, if nothing else, to learn how to speak, you should listen to him. So yes, astrophysics and sneakers, two very different things.
Two very interesting things. How about you, Mr. Steve? Could you tell us a fun fact about yourself?
Yeah, I think I'll say a little bit weird. Like whenever I'm free, usually what I would do is I don't watch movie, I don't read books anymore, but I would drive around the cities and the towns and look at the houses, how people decorate the house, how people build the exterior of the house and all, right? So because I'm really into property, so I have a couple of properties, right? So I'm always trying to see how to improve my house and all, how to improve my gardens and the exterior and sometimes interior as well. Yeah.
That's quite interesting. I do that too. Every time I go to a friend's house, I'm always finding myself looking at their interiors, their designing, and stealing ideas from them. I apologize if you hear barking in the background. That is my hybrid dog. So,
Okay.
Mr. Brian, how are you? Can you share a fun fact about yourself?
Sure, I'd love to. And I'm hoping along the way we can also get to see our hybrid lizard dog.
Sure,
So,
definitely.
being a nature lover myself, I spend a lot of time in the woods. So last time when I was on a camping trip, I found out that I can somehow skip a rock over 20 times. So I learned this by accident somehow when I was trying to learn how to skip stones. I learned to do it like 3 to 5 skips at a time. And then slowly I went lower and lower, kept changing my form until the point that I got like over 15 skips. And I'm like, whoa, I didn't even know that was possible. And I realized that I think the world record was about 40 skips or so. So I'm working my way there, hopefully a record holder. No, I'm just kidding.
It would be an honor to one day say, I have spoken to a record holder. That would be a good thing to do, a good thing to have. Thank you for the speakers for sharing a fun fact about themselves. And I will definitely, in between, show you my lizard dog whenever he decides to show up. So let's just kickstart this webinar, first of all. So I would like to ask my first question to you speakers. Oh, before I do that and before I forget, for the participants, you are welcome to ask questions throughout this webinar, regardless of what we're talking about. If you have a question that you have in mind, then you can always type it in the chat. Or if you don't feel comfortable typing it in the chat because your names might show up, because I'm very sure that a lot of you would like to remain anonymous, which is also something that I like to remain. So I have opened a Slido. I hope that all of you know what Slido is, but if you don't, you can just type into Google Slido. Once you go into the site, I'm just sending the code right now into the chat. So you can type this code and you can enter and ask any question that you'd like, and we'll be monitoring the Q&A section and asking the questions on your behalf as well. So now that I have done that, we can begin. So my first question to you speakers is, how has the pandemic affected your company? So what are the different challenges that you've had to face in your company, and how have you overcome them? And maybe perhaps something that is a strength that you have for your a strength that you have that you gained throughout the pandemic. So Mr. Steve, can you go first? Can you let us know?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest impact to our company was that we were forced to operate our fully operating our business online or virtually, right? So that comes to a point that, okay, honestly, this is not something new to us, because as a technology company, usually we will deal with customers from all over the world. So we have been attending calls and all. So it's something quite normal to us, but to certain department is really impact a lot. So for instance, our sales department were not able to go out to meet customer, engage with customer, right? So I think that is a very important factor, right? To meet customer, to be able to engage with them, right? And also the project management team, because management team, we need to engage with customer a lot as well, right? We need to engage with all the stakeholders, make sure that everyone is happy with the project progress and all, right? So I think these are the two areas that facing biggest challenge. The rest, I think, is still fine, right? So how did we overcome it is that a lot of time we try to join the course. Okay, back in the old days when we try to engage with customers, that before the meeting, we will be there maybe 30 minutes earlier. We bump into each other at the pantry, at the lobby, everywhere, or even in the meeting room, right? So the difference of today's meeting is that people do it online. So as much as possible, we'll still try to get into the call maybe 10 minutes earlier. But sometimes we do face a challenge that the host is not there and nobody is starting the meeting, right? So that is unavoidable, but we are trying our best, like we try to join meeting earlier so that we get some time to do some small talk with the customers and all. So that's how we build the relationship. And also we sometimes do schedule some calls just to talk about the project with the stakeholders. So that is something that we don't do in the past, but right now we are trying to do something like that, that we schedule some special calls just to discuss. Like there's no topic, there's no agenda plan. We just get into a call and say, hey, what do you feel about the project and all, right? So yeah, so it's a lot more, we call it intentional socialization. We purposely do something intentionally just to make sure that we are able to cover the stakeholders management. Unlike last time, we can do it unintentionally, like at the pantry and everything, right? Yeah, so that's a little bit of the sharing from my end.
Thank you so much, Mr. Steve. Mr. Brian?
All right. So I think it's very interesting to compare the three of us here as a company, because I think Ascendo and also Rolling Arrays, you guys are more solution-based company. You guys provide a solution. But us at Bila, being a local convenience grocer, a relatively young local convenience grocer, our focus on business is more of a service. So we are the frontliners. And here at Bila, because of the pandemic, our business relies a lot on physical outlets, actual manpower being at the outlets, and also the movement of actual physical stocks. So without any of the above that I stated, the day-to-day business would not be able to go on, and our operations would be, of course, hampered. So disrupting everything that we are doing. So moving in and out of lockdown, I believe that based on the different stages and severity of the lockdown, our company at Bila has had to make plenty of pivotal decisions and adapt very, very rapidly. So, and I think as a HR based company background, all of us can know that these differences, these changes can disrupt a company and a team a lot. So I think one of the things that we can learn from this is it has become a strength for us. So instead of running, we are now facing the problems head on, and we are learning how to grow and adapt as a company, how to evolve as a company. So if we fail, we learn. If we succeed, it's a very healthy payout. But what's most important is that we all survive. And when we survive, we become resilient and we become stronger. So that's what the pandemic has done for our company, I believe.
That's actually quite nice. If you fail, then you learn from that. And if you succeed, it's a good thing. So that's a really good point there. Mr. Sharma?
So I think, the economic issues aside, right? Everybody suffered during the pandemic. So I think I won't talk about that. But where I think for us it hit the most was Ascendo was built on a culture of constant collaboration. So for the first, 12 years of these 14 years, we were very, very closely knit business. I think like Steve was talking about, right? Purposeful interaction was designed into our workflows. Right? So coming together, working together, we can't get people out of the office. Right? These guys stay on till 10, 11 o'clock. Not because they work, they do work very hard, but also they go out for dinners together, they go for drinks together, they come back together. They want to always be around each other. So I think for us, the biggest issue, or one of the biggest issue, was that, right? So when you take away that adrenaline that you get every day with being with each other, and now everything becomes digital. So I won't use the word digital. It wasn't digital. It was automated. So that was a system. There's a big difference between digital and buying systems. Yeah. So everything moved on Zoom, MST, Google, or whatever it was, and all of this started creating very, very quickly through the business. So what we had to do was relearn how to engage with our people. I think that was a big thing, right? Building a culture is an everyday effort. You don't build it once and then it goes away, right? It's an everyday effort. So I think for us, or my biggest learning was, I never knew how to manage a business online 100%. Right. So now suddenly everything had to move this, and I had to be the first to say, look, I need to unlearn everything I know and then relearn a whole bunch of new things. So that was the first part. The second part, I think, for us was, and we made this decision very quickly in March of 2020. In fact, when the lockdown was announced, right? The shareholders of Sendo very quickly huddled, and we sent out an email very quickly to all our staff to say, look, 2020 and 2021 is going to be a very tough year for the business, but we will make sure the economic benefit of the business will not be the reason we make decisions about our staff. So we never had any cuts because of the pandemic. We didn't have salary cuts because of the pandemic, and that impacted the business financially very badly, right? But we felt, it was either for the betterment of one business or for the 60, 70 people that work in Ascendo. So these decisions that we made was very painful, but I think this was the same decisions that made the people within Ascendo recognize the effort the business puts in to look after them. And I think that's the big difference you will see, right? I'm not just talking about Ascendo. You will see a lot of businesses that went the extra mile to look after their staff. And you saw a lot of businesses who used the pandemic as an excuse to increase their profit margin. Right? And neither is right or wrong. I'm not here to say, oh, this is bad, this isn't, right. I've had big company CEOs look at what we do and say, you're a stupid fool. Why would you do that? The purpose of running a business is to make a profit. Right. So you've got to balance this journey. But, we felt at that time, looking after the staff was more important than, financial profit. So these were some of the challenges we really had, and having good partners made that journey a lot easier in driving for this. So these were our biggest challenges besides all the economic problems.
Well, it makes me very happy to hear that you did put your staff first and you did take care of your staff, because we did hear a lot throughout the pandemic of cuts happening and salaries also being cut and a lot of that. So it's really nice to hear a different perspective, that there are businesses out there that have not gone that way and that have focused on their people and taking care of their people, which is quite important, I feel. So it's good to know that. So currently, what is the new norm for your organizations? So has your work culture changed, or is there anything in your organization that you no longer do? Mr. Sharma, let's continue with you.
So these terms, all this new norm, the digital, all I don't know, I feel all these are fatigue really listening to this. everyone through. I mean, I'm not blaming you, right? But this is the
Right.
term the market uses all the time, right? And genuinely, I feel really at the end of the day, it goes back to the basics of people. There's a wonderful, I forget who said it, but if you Google it, I'm sure you'll find the person who says it. No matter what business you're in the business of people. So however technology driven you are, or whatever it is, you're always in the business of people, right? So I think for us, adapting very quickly, and the new, as we speak about this, what is required, right? I will focus a lot on digital, but the digital I'm focusing on is not buying technology, knowing how to use technology, because you learn one piece of technology, 2-3 years later another one will come and you have to learn that process. I speak a lot about the digital mindset, right? And the digital mindset starts with 4 very simple journeys, right? You hypothesize, you experiment, you validate, you improve. And if you take that as a concept to now drive everything you do, right? What is your hypothesis? What is your idea? How do I very quickly now test that idea? Anyone who's gone through a science class should know this, right? You hypothesize, then you experiment. It works, it doesn't work. And that's the big thing that you got to see, right? I think like Brian was saying earlier, when you fail, you learn. And that's the important part. When you experiment, you don't fail. You learn how not to do it again. And that's what you got to keep doing, right? I think Thomas Edison once said, I didn't fail. I think it took something like 1,000 or 10,000 tries before he came up with the bulb, right? He said, I didn't fail 10,000 times. I learned 10,000 ways not to build the bulb. So you've got to have that mindset in order to be able to constantly move forward. So what's new is adaptability, right? These things will keep changing. Today we've heard monkeypox. You might go into another kind of lockdown, right? And what happens if that, now that wave will keep coming and going. The ability for us to adapt is going to be key for not just survival, but how do you thrive as a business, as an employee. More and more, I don't see, this is why I say I'm old. I don't mean to say more and more of the younger generation, but more and more you hear a lot of people say, oh, but this is not in my job description. Right? The moment I hear that, that is a sign of you not being able to grow, right? Because if you're not able to stretch in every way possible, you're not going to go very far, right? If this is what I'm told my job is, so this is all I'm going to do, then you're not going to go very far. So I always go back to being extremely adaptable, and the ability to have tolerance to ambiguity. We don't, if a leader comes to you and says, I know exactly what the next 5 years is going to look like, they're lying, right? Nobody predicted the impact of COVID. Nobody, right? Not Jeff Bezos, not Elon Musk, not the Malaysian government. Nobody could, right? So the ability to adapt as you go through that journey is going to be extremely important.
That is true. Again, apologies for my dog. That is true. Adaptability is very important. Mr. Brian, what are the new norms that your organization has, or a change in your work culture, or if there's anything that you no longer do?
I think it's very interesting, Mr. Sharma, that you mentioned the digital mindset. I really like that term, digital mindset. Instead of IT knowledge, it's digital mindset. Because I think here we will highlight mindset later on. And it's a certain mindset of people and the new generation that have to adapt to this, and also all generations in the workforce. So I think one differences to this new normal that we're faced with because of the pandemic, because of the accelerated fourth industrial revolution, is I think work culture and communications when it comes to the workplace, be it online or in the office physically. I think the pandemic has forced us to be very, very flexible and very remote when it comes to work. So you cannot just expect to sit down on a table with your laptop to be able to do your work. You are constantly thinking, constantly working, constantly trying to do what's best for the company, no matter what environment you're in. So be like for me, I work in the office, I work at home, and sometimes I work at the outlets when it comes to operations. So I think it also has forced us to be a lot more open when it comes to communicating, since I think the fourth industrial revolution came in with IT and the mix of flexible working environment. I think it has forced us to see communication as no longer just emails and calls and WhatsApps. So it's a mix of everything already. And I think open communication is now a lot more accepted, especially from top to bottom. So nowadays, maybe communicating with your line managers can extend to communicating with the directors directly. And I think we're much more open to that now, no longer as traditional and structured as we used to be. And I think results driven, we are more results driven instead of focusing so much on, oh, I've worked 8 amount of hours, I've done a great job. Sometimes now you can work 5 hours, you can work 6 hours. As long as you deliver your deliverables, as long as you get good results, then that's very, very good already lah. So this is the flexible working environment. And also technologically, like IT, digital mindset, we are so much more dependent on it. And it's like you said, us as psychology students, myself, research, having that research mindset, bringing it into the IT world, bringing it into the working world is so important. We learn by hypothesizing, learn by making experiments, basically. Right.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. Mr. Steve?
Yeah, okay. I think the biggest new norm to our company would be people no longer coming to the office, right? So back in the old days, though we use technology a lot to communicate with our customer from other countries, right? But a lot of time we will still go back to the office, sit together, because as a project team, maybe let's say 3 to 5 of us in the same project, we usually have to sit down together, discuss about different things, right? And then we also attend calls together, things like that. So though we are a technology-driven company, but a lot of time we're still coming to the office to meet each other and also to sit down together for discussion and all. So pandemic has changed it all, right? So now we have to just do everything online, right? So as part of the leadership team here in Malaysia, also what we are trying to do is we try to trust our people rather than to ensure everyone sitting in the office is meaning that they are doing their job. Now we trust our people. So because of that, we also come up with some solution like mobile clock in, clock out. We allow our customer to allow their staff to clock in using the mobile. So regardless where is your current location, because a lot of people are working from home. So last time it used to be a geo-fencing, meaning you have to be in this building in order to be able to check in. Right. So because of the pandemic, so we kind of like open up the features to allow people to be able to clock in everywhere they are. So I think that is what being changed during the pandemic time.
That's quite an interesting feature. I wish we had that. Clock in from wherever you are. That would be really nice. All right, so I did hear a lot about even the different types of skills that you've had to develop. And again, digital mindset, I agree. People have had to change that about themselves. Like they had to have a more digital mindset with this new change that's happening. So what do you think are the top 5 job skills that are needed for every job? I did hear a lot about adaptability and flexibility, which is a really big skill that people do need. So are there any new skills that your organization has deemed important, or something that, or a skill that you have had to learn yourself to keep up with this new digital era in a way? Mr. Brian, how about we start with you?
Right. So first on my list in terms of skills is adaptability and flexibility. Because again, that's the thing that I think we all like to highlight nowadays. In any working condition, in any company, in any industry, flexibility and adaptability, how fast you can change, how fast you can accept something, how fast you can learn, and how much you can relearn from what you've learned on the go, very, very easily. That is what determines whether you succeed or not. And I think it also adds to the stress and how easy it is to adapt to anything. And the next one would be effective communication. I think that is something that we have to focus a lot more. Not just communication on a surface level, but deeper communication as well. How you build up relationships with people, knowing what to say, when to say, and how to say it is so important. Sometimes the say here is not even just about words, not even about talking. It can be non-verbal, it can be a lot more. Like for example, Steve, you meet with your clients much earlier before even discussing about businesses. That is something that's so important now. I think that has changed compared to the traditional mindset of working. Quick thinking and reacting. So I think the ability to effectively receive information, to interpret information, and to build up on ideas and thoughts, that is something that we need to focus on now. the faster we can come up with a solution. The faster that the solution can be implemented into a company. I think for the fourth, it is the IT comprehension and understanding of IT. In this fourth IR, I think everything is somehow related to a computer or a chip. So the moment we start learning how to understand these computer functions, these electrical functions, then I think our job will be much more easier, even if it's not related to IT in a way. So things that are not related to IT somehow will funnel into IT. So the moment we understand how to link that two together, I think our working life would be much more easier. And the fifth one is a very interesting one. I think the fifth skill that we need to learn is to play, because I believe that we need to learn a balance between work and play. And the moment we start learning how to balance these two together, I think work would be so much more easier. This can be two things. This can be direct play, playing games, playing activities, going for events with the company, or it can be work-life balance as well. But I think coming to work with the idea of simply working is no longer going to be something that's normal. I think we should start working towards having the skill of learning how to balance play and work together. Yeah. Should I answer the second?
Yeah, if you have anything more to say, go ahead.
Okay, and I think learning how to merge the skills would be important as well. Learning how to link adaptable thinking with playing, adaptable thinking with IT, that would be something that's very, very good. So in a working environment where it's so accelerated, so vague, and we are more closer than ever to each other because of the quick connection, all these skills can come into play, and they can be a rojak of talents, basically.
It's quite interesting. I actually really liked your last skill, the play skill. That was quite interesting to me. The first thing that came into my mind was that blocks game that we have, where you have to take out the block and then put it. And I remember during my my university days, we would do that in between assignments, and that would really also kind of relieve stress in a way for us as students. So I'm pretty sure if we have something like that, like a stress reliever kind of thing in workplaces, and we play games, that'll be a lot of fun to do in the office. Mr. Steve, how about you?
I think some of the points might be overlapping with Brian's one, but yeah, the first one definitely to me will be technology literacy, because these days everything is about technology, right? Back in the old days, people are not familiar with using QR code and everything, right? So these days, because of pandemic and all, people get so used to all these things, right? And also the Zoom call, this, right? So back in the old days, a lot of people don't know how to use this. Even now, even my mother knows how to use Zoom to do call with me, right? So yeah, so I think technology, that is the first thing in my mind, right? Second thing will be flexibility. Of course, with the pandemic, a lot of things changed, a lot of things being changed, right? So we have to be able to adapt and also being flexible, right? The next two things will be kind of like linked to each other, would be critical thinking and also problem solving, right? So I think this one have been very important all this while, in a way, right? So we need to be able to analyze the situation and see what is the best action to take during a certain situation. Like, for example, during COVID, how do we handle, like what I mentioned just now, the lack of interaction with customer, with the internal staff and all, right? So yeah, so analyze the situation and also come out with a problem solving. I mean, to show your problem solving skills, right? To come out with the solution. So yeah, so these are the two. And the last one would be leadership and social influence. So over this pandemic, one of the key things that I noticed is that a lot of leaders, especially when they cannot come to office and talk to their staff and all, right, they tend to post on LinkedIn a lot. I think my CEO is one of the examples. So I've seen him post a lot of LinkedIn posts these days compared to the old days, right? So I feel as a leader to engage with people, I think the trend is to change. Last time they used to come into office and say, people these days you need to learn about technology, but now they post online and say, guys, we should learn about technology, right? So I think that is the different way of the leadership and also the social influence, right? So with this great resignation, I think one of the key things that as a leadership in rowing a race also, We have been talking about this, that because of the great resignation, a lot of people are leaving. And in our industry, it's a very niche market. It's very difficult for us to hire someone with the similar skill set. Right? I think in whole Malaysia, we have like maybe 50 local people who know this skill set. So for us to, if somebody left the organization, for us to hire someone else to replace them, it's very difficult. So yeah, so as a leadership, we don't want to lose talent. And in the midst of this great resignation, we are seeing a lot of companies have a lot of resignation. And thanks God that our company, we don't have that much. I think last year we have like 10 to 15, somewhere around there, percentage, right? So I think that is still fine, which is still quite normal. So I think, yeah, so we have to do a lot of leadership engagement via online LinkedIn, and also sometimes we do call, like me with my team. Sometimes we do some after work call, like 6 o'clock. We used to go for drinks at the bar, and now we go for drink in front of our laptop. We bring our own beer and talk, right? Yeah, so sometimes we do deliver like Starbucks to some of our colleagues. Yeah, so to do some engagement. Yeah, so that is the key things that in my company we are trying to focus on, which is the last competency that I mentioned just now, the leadership, and also the social influence.
Mr. Steve, you had me at you deliver Starbucks to your to your employees. That would be really nice to have somebody just knocking on my door saying, "Here's your Starbucks order." But there is another thing that you brought up that I've heard a lot about. So the Great Resignation that you mentioned, I've seen a lot of articles, especially on LinkedIn, about this, but I'm not able to understand what it really is. So would you like to share a little bit about what the Great Resignation is?
Yeah, I think ever since the pandemic started, a lot of people kind of changed the mindset. I think people see life differently. They might feel that I deserve a better life. What if one day I just die like that, right? So I think that kind of mindset, I think, started last year or something like that, or last 2 years, I think. Yeah. So the mindset kind of started shifting. A lot of people try to resign and they want a more flexible job. They want a better paid job. They feel that they deserve more. So that is I think it's an impact to the whole world. So it's not only in certain countries, but generally in the whole world. Yeah, so they term it as the Great Resignation. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that explanation, Mr. Steve. How about you, Mr. Sharma? What are the top 5 job skills that you feel are needed for every job?
So let me perhaps start with a different point of view, right? I think the panel members have given a lot of the skills required, particular skills. So I'm going to share 2 articles in the chat group, right? Don't read it now, read it later. But as you guys were talking, I very quickly researched this and then pulled this out. So if you saw my hand moving, that's what I was doing. That's one of the skills that's going to be required in the future, and I'll talk about that in a bit. But the World Economic Forum does this huge survey about skills and understanding skills. 10, 15 years ago, the shelf life of a skill was about 10 years. Right? So you learn a skill, and that skill is relevant for about 10 years. Today, the shelf life of a skill is dropping to about 3 to 4 years, right? Which means, to me, the biggest skill you've got to learn is your ability to unlearn and relearn, right? And that's a direct function of your cognitive capability. So, I start with that process, right? How can you constantly unlearn and relearn? So this idea that I'm a graduate, so I no longer have to study, or I no longer have to learn, is a dying proposition. I don't want to say if you're thinking like that, doom is near, but it's a dying proposition, right? We keep talking about the lifelong learner, and the lifelong learner is somebody who constantly goes out and seeks for information. So I think the biggest skill, and if you look at the second one, I think they list out a bunch of skills, right? A lot of this are what people term soft skills. And I know that there's a question about it later, and I don't want to steal your thunder then. But I absolutely do not believe there is a difference between hard skills and soft skills. Skills are skills. In 2019, I had the privilege to have dinner with the CEO of IBM, right, Ginny, in San Francisco. She said that there was a term. So she's used. So sorry, I'm not trying to throw a name. I'm giving context to what I'm about to say, right? So when we were in that conversation, she used a term that I really like, and I've been now stealing that term very actively everywhere. And she said skills as the future currency for exchange is going to be the capability of your wallet. You as an individual, your wallet size is the skill for your future currency of exchange, right? So the thicker your wallet, the more the skills you have. Now, Brian spoke about the interchangeability of the skills. Jobs are so quickly changing. There used to be a time when we say, a software programmer needs to know, C++, needs to know Java, needs to know this. Today, there's low code, no code programming, right? So somebody who doesn't know anything about programming can learn how to build an application very, very quickly and go out and do this and generate revenue, right? But the capability of really strong programmer is somebody who's got strong analytical skills, somebody who's able to zoom in and then zoom back out to be able to under a good programmer. Most programmers don't. So, all these skills are interchangeable and intertransferable, right? So if you move away from one job, and if you worry about a job, then, read the first article. The speed of automation of jobs is extremely scary, right? Harvard is now in the midst of changing their medical syllabus to stop teaching doctors about, or stop teaching them as much about the medical side and teaching them more on empathy, because the AI and machine learning that's available out there, they believe in the next 5 to 6 years are going to surpass any learning that you can have in the medical field, right? So now doctors need to learn how to be more, or show more empathy to the patient and understand that, because AI will drive the other part of the diagnostics. Lawyers having the same issue, right? You've got AI like Ross, who can now take on, you've got a case, and I put the case parameters in, and it will scour 100,000 similar cases and give you similarities, suggestions, defense mechanisms. You as one brain can't think of all of this, right? So all the technology is becoming the support ecosystem of the human mind, right? So in that sense, I'm going to use this term. Please don't take me to task with it. But we are all cyborgs already, right? Whether it be through software or the damn hardware that we use. You can't say, there you go, you're the phone, right? This phone that you carry along with you is more powerful than all the computers put together that sent the first rocket to the moon. Just take a moment to think about that. This thing that you carry in your pocket is more powerful than the computers used to send the first spaceship to the moon, right? And that's the power of digital thinking, right? And when you have this kind of power, knowing how to use it is going to be extremely important. So, when you understand that these things are going to constantly change. Now, we spoke about adaptability, we spoke about all, tolerance to ambiguity, but I think the capability to understand that jobs will come and go, our skills will come and go, my ability to unlearn and relearn is going to be extremely crucial. And that there is no difference between hard skills and soft skills. They are skills. And the more you build, the better your currency for future exchange.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Sharma. There is actually a question for you from our participants. So a question, because we were talking a lot about adaptability and flexibility earlier on. So the question was, how best can we do as HR to influence the owner of a family-based company to adapt and adopt to work from home culture?
I think that goes back to trust and control mechanisms, right? So the premise of a family-based business, there's an insinuation that, family means, I want to control everything. It's relatively old school. I'm assuming that's the insinuation, right? I won't say who, but somebody close to my family has a similar problem, right? They've been running the business for 40 years. Now absolutely don't like the fact that, staff don't come to work. How do I know that they're working? If they're not in front of me, I don't believe they're working and all that. So I think two things come into play. You've got to understand that dynamics, right? So the problem with us is we swing like a pendulum, right? And you can't have that. From coming to work 5 days a week to not coming to work at all, and we expect people to very quickly adapt to that journey. There has to be a balance in that swing, and like a pendulum, you find that balance, right? The pendulum will swing from one end to the other, and slowly it will settle somewhere. So my suggestion to this is, what's your control mechanism as HR to identify what key capabilities you're looking for? How do you control the mechanism? So a boss or a business owner comes in and says, look, let me use Bila as an example, right? I hope it wasn't you who asked this question, right? Right. But, or I won't use Bila, sorry. Let me use a convenience store as an example, right? You've got movement of goods. You've got, people who need to sell these goods. You've got logistics. You've got supply chain. There are things where you need to be there, right? And in that journey, you just can't say, okay, everybody can work online, and you figure it out, and then technology will take over. You can't, right? There are some parts that you can automate, and there's some parts that you've got to optimize for process generation. So I think number one, understand the actual problem. Very often it's a trust problem. Right? I am so used to seeing my staff. I believe that if they don't see me, they won't work, right? So how do you as HR genuinely solve that problem first? When you can solve that problem, then you can put control mechanisms in place, whether it be, buying rolling arrays, attendance system online, and there are many systems that are available out there that can help support this ecosystem, right? But first identify why this business owner doesn't do it. Very often it goes back to trust, right? And that is where you start. How do you now replace a trust mechanism that is invisible? If you can figure that out, then everything else becomes very easy. The answer is never buying system first. I'm a huge proponent of machine learning, artificial intelligence. We sell our own systems, but I always say technology is a mere enabler for your end goal. Right? If you don't solve, so think about it as a PPT, not PowerPoint, people, process, technology, right? So anytime you think about implementing something, this is the layer you think about. People, how do you solve at that layer first? Right? When you solve that layer, then you can create the process for that journey. And then you can use the technology as the enabler for that.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sharma, for answering the questions. And we
answered this person's question.
There's also another question that I would like to open to all three speakers. So as mentioned, I think earlier while you were talking about specific technology. So a question is, as mentioned, that learning specific technology is not the most crucial today. May I know how I, as an accounting student, intend to improve IT knowledge? It's open to anybody who wants to answer this question.
I'll just say a couple of things and I'll pass it to the panel, right? I think
no problem.
Did it very nicely. It's not IT knowledge. It's your comfort with technology, right? And that's where you sit down and understand. And while you guys were talking, I quickly went and Googled this document that I wanted to pull, right? So there's a few things that I think is important in this journey. Number one, you don't have to, people have understood today, you no longer have to have the answers for everything. You just need to know where to look for the answers. Right? That's a big mindset shift, right? There used to be a time at work where the knowledge needed to be in here. Now it no longer needs to be there, right? Because you want to try and clear the clutter as much as possible and outsource knowledge management to places where you can access knowledge, right? So the way I think about this is, knowledge needs to be accessible between 30 seconds and 3 minutes, right? If you can access that information piece that I'm looking for in that time, you know where to look, right? It is when I ask you a question, it takes 3 days to come back to me that I think you don't know where you're looking. So understanding technology as a whole is more important than, knowing IT skills. That's my strong belief. And I think Steve said it very nicely, right? So I'll say that, I'll stop there, and I'll pass it to the rest of the panelists.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sharma. Mr. Steve, do you have anything to add on to that?
Yeah, I think for accounting, more towards, it really depends on which company you're joining and what kind of system they're using. There are so many accounting systems out there, so there's no way that you can learn all the system, right? So even HR is the same thing. There's so many HR systems on the market, and it's difficult for one person to learn everything, right? So I think the most important thing is that you need to first have the open mindset to accept technology, right? So when people come up with a new proposal in terms of how to improve the process using the technology and all, you have to have that open mindset. You have to be ready to learn. And of course, you have to find a way to learn. Usually when a new system is being introduced, there will be some training, right? Training will be provided, or if you onboard a new company, definitely they will do a kind of like a knowledge transfer to enable you to do your job, right? They have to tell you how to use the system and all. And other than that, a lot of others technology-driven stuff will be like your mobile, like what just now Shamna mentioned about. I think it's more like mobile devices with all the different applications, which sometimes may not be directly linked to your job, but somehow you will get linked to it. So actually, I have another topic that I wanted to speak about later. Is something related to how we use the QR code. Like back in the old days, one of our project, we wanted to use the QR code as for the change management perspective. What we have suggested, I have suggested to my customer is that you put a QR code and you just put something big is coming. And you don't have to mention what is coming. People will curious, people will scan, right? Instead of you telling them HR system is coming live soon, people will say, oh, HR system, don't bother, right? So you better put just something that create the curiosity. People will scan, and then they will read through the articles about what is coming up, right? So my friend in this, my customer, and also is a friend of mine, so was telling me that, what is QR code? I don't know anything about QR code. I don't think people know about QR code. You are IT guys, we are not IT guys. So that is what the feedback was given to me that time, right? So but pandemic changed it all, right? Everyone now use QR code, which the MySuggestra and all, everyone know what is QR code about, right? So yeah, so I think that is something that is not part of your job, but you have to be open up to the new technology that is coming, right? So yeah, so that is the thing that I want to bring up about this technology. It's not solely that you go and learn every bit of technology. Even I myself as an IT guy, I don't know everything about technology. I know maybe 30%, 20% of technology only. Right? Yeah, that's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Steve. Mr. Brian, anything to add on?
I think mindset's important. Like Mr. Sharma highlighted earlier, digital mindset. It's not digital knowledge that's important, it's the digital mindset, that learning and relearning. You have the tool. For example, let's consider getting a knife, right? You have a tool, a knife. So depending on what you're using that knife for, you can hold it in different ways. And you learn this not by taking a guide and being, okay, so you hold it this far from the knife blade, you can do this. You hold this far from the knife blade, you can do this. It's a lot of, you can get a guide and try and learn as much as you can from the guide. But at one point, like we watched Top Gun last weekend, you take the guide, you throw it away. When you're on the air, you don't think, you just do. So when it comes to, I think, tools and using the tools for work, you don't think too much. Just do, and slowly over time, the solution will come to you. Like doing my thesis, I think I got stuck a lot during my thesis because I kept thinking about the technicalities, about the small little nitty-gritty details. And instead, what I should have done was actually just went on and started doing it. Because when you start using the tools, you will start to learn what is the right way to use it, what is the wrong way to use it, and what are some of the shortcuts that you can use those tools for. So just go for it and don't overthink it.
You can't learn swimming by watching other people swim.
Correct, exactly.
That's a good point. So since we're still on the topic of skills that are needed in the workplace, there is another question. What would be the future for educators? Like, what are the crucial skills that you think they would need? Floor is open to anybody to answer it.
Okay, so maybe I give a framework that I use. I'm not saying this is a great framework for everyone, but this is a framework I use for any industry. right? So the way I look at it is, I build a triangle, and you can see a lot. There's a common theme. A lot of what I do sits in a triangle, and I break it down by IQ, EQ, CQ, right? And now I use the term EQ. It's a big philosophical conversation and debate when you come into Ascendo, because we're a psychology-based company. So whether you believe in EQ or the more smaller facets of it, anyway. So, but as a framework, IQ, EQ, CQ, right? IQ really is about your intellectual horsepower, and that is something you've got to figure out how to grow very, very quickly. And that's your capability to start thinking and growing, and that's your critical thinking capability, right? Your EQ is about your interest in behavior, and how do you understand people's behavior. So you talk about accounting. Do you take time to understand how people react or respond to accounting? And what does that mean? And what are the behavioral capabilities you need to learn in order to deal and be really good at that? If you're talking about education, understanding your students, understanding your peers, and what is important, how do you educate people? Education has changed so much from pedagogy to what we're doing today in that process. Now, I'm not an educator, so I won't pretend to know. No, but as you go through that, having genuine interest in understanding who that person you're dealing with, and what's that behavior they're looking from you. And the third part is CQ, customer. And the customer can be internal, can be external, can be the industry, right? So when you get all these three things together, no matter what industry you move to, no matter what job you do, the same framework applies everywhere, right? Do I have the intellectual horsepower to drive? Do I have the interest to understand the people that work within this area? And how do I understand the industry, the job, the passion for customer in this process that I'm in? These three things is typically the framework I use for me in order to drive a lot of the things we try and change within Ascendo.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma. Mr. Steve, anything you would like to add on?
Sorry, what was the question again? I can't recall.
The question was, what would be the future for educators? So what are the crucial skills that you think they would need?
Educator. I think pretty much most of the things are still similar to today's business, how they run the business today for educator, right? And it will be the same for the next upcoming one. Only a few things that is different, I think, is the same topic that we are talking about, the 4IR, right? So yeah, technology, you see the way that technology has changed during changed the industry of education during this COVID time, pandemic time, is that a lot of people are implementing learning system, right? They are implementing learning system to be, I think, especially for the education industry, right? That they are actually implementing this kind of system to enable the students to attend courses from home, right? So technology, I think it's all about technology. Other than that, the rest of the thing will be still same like what you have been doing today. The only difference is you are using technology to teach, right? And maybe even for examination also, you don't need paper form. People don't have to, you have to introduce some form of, the governance rules, right? Like people turn on their video and sit there and and fill up the question for the exam and all, right? So those kind of different things, but a lot more linked back to the technology, right? With the 4G, 5G now, right? And all these technologies. So I think the technology somehow in the next couple of years, something new will be introduced to replace the existing way of the education, but it's a lot more leaning towards the technology. So yeah, so if I can say that what is going to be different the next couple of years for this industry is going to be technology.
Thank you so much, Mr. Steve. Mr. Brian, anything you'd like to add on?
I think I like the concept, the theory of using the triangle from Mr. Sharma, the IQ, EQ, and CQ. But I think I'm going to make that triangle a square. I think I'm going to add one more facet into that. I think adversity quotient, AQ, is something more important. I'm taking a much more philosophical approach, a Stoic mentality, basically, Stoic philosophy. Stoicism basically believes that resilience and adversity is something that is ingrained into our lives. We will have hardships, we will fail a lot. And as a teacher, I think teaching your class, the first time, the kids will probably not get it. Selling your products to a customer, the first time, probably they will not buy it. For me, opening up a retail store, for example, the first few times, maybe we might not hit the mark, but if we have that EQ, we have that resilience, we have that motivation and mindset, that willpower to keep going on, that's where we can keep learning, relearning, making mistakes, and then learning again. And I think that's what's important as a teacher and as employees in this new workforce. Resilience, not being so used to that, instant gratification that we all love from this digital age, I think. Yeah.
I love it. I'm going to add it in.
The square. But I'm so happy, Mr. Brian, that you mentioned EQ, because that is something that I was also wondering, a question that I had in my mind. To what extent is it important to have EQ? Mr. Brian, can we continue with you?
All right, sure. So EQ. All right, so I think EQ, Mr. Sharma was going to bring up the IQ, EQ, and CQ. Emotional quotient, that is something so important. And that's why I think we as psychology students, and because we study psychology because of that reason, exactly. Like, for example, the example that you gave, Mr. Sharma, doctors are no longer just learning the technical skills, the doctoring skills, but we now realize how important that emotional side, that psychological side is. Building relationships, understanding how people feel, how people react, and how people think. It really, really helps us out a lot. And especially, I think, in the working environment, as modern companies, I'm pretty sure Ascendo and Rolling Erase as well, we as a modern company, we start looking at people as the main part of the business. The matter if it's our employees, between employees talking together, EQ is so important because it determines how we actually interact between all the different stakeholders within a company. So I think having higher level of EQ, having good understanding of EQ will definitely, I think, ease the way we approach and look at work and life in general.
Okay, that's an interesting view. Mr. Steve, how about you? To what extent do you feel it's important to have EQ?
I think EQ is super important, right? Because without good EQ or high EQ, right? So you won't be able to handle people relationship. And in today's job, there's nothing that you can just do everything by yourself. If you open up an IT company or whatever company, you can't just do everything by yourself. Even if you open up your own IT company, you will become a leader, right? So as a leader, if your EQ is low, right, people cannot work under you, right? So I think based on some research online that I seen last time, that is that around more than 70% of the people, of the carriers, got derailed because of the EQ problem, right? Because they do not have that kind of IQ to handle that kind of stress or to handle that kind of human relation and all, right? So it's difficult to gain trust of the staff. So because of that, even though these people are very strong technically and all, right, but these people cannot move up to the next level because of the EQ problem, right? So you have seen some people, let's say this person A have scoring, let's say 70, the person B scoring 75, but person A can move up to the leadership role, but person B cannot, though he's slightly smarter, right, in the sense, right? But because in terms to move up in the career, right, you need to have a very good people skill. We call it people skill, right? And also human touch, right? So all these things are very important, especially to the leadership role. So when you started your career in the first 10 years, maybe you won't feel it, how important is the people relationship and all to you. It's just learning about the job. If I'm a programmer, I learn how to do a program, right? So yeah, so that's the first 10 years of your career. Subsequently, the next 10 years is then when you are going to try your best to fight to move up to the next level, right? So that's when this EQ is coming into play. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing that, Mr. Steve. Mr. Sharma, how about you?
So yeah, I think it's part of my first triangle, right? So it's always going to be important. I'm going to take a little bit from what both of them said, right? And I think go back to the question about the educator. The genuine So I'm for the ease of conversation, I'm just going to use EQ being equivalent to understanding behavior, right? We can debate the finer details in another conversation, but behavior component, right? So I think as an educator, and let me use that as an example, right? If you were never interested about learning how your students learned in a normal environment, this new digital mindset is not going to change anything. You're still not going to be interested in knowing how they learn, right? But if you are genuinely interested in trying to figure that out, right, how they learned, no matter what medium in which you are passing the knowledge through, you will find a way to pass it in its most optimal journey, right? So that is the same environment, or when you talk about EQ throughout the career, right? Of anybody within an organization. I will play devil's advocate a little bit, and Steve mentioned, the first 10 years, you really not. He didn't say you shouldn't. He said, you because you are kind of an individual contributor, you're given tasks, right? From a behavioral psychology standpoint, right? You work with peer, and then you start managing people, then you start managing organizations. As you start going up more and more, there is lesser of technical skills and a lot more behavioral capability, exactly what Steve said, right? But a lot of this is built at the fundamental layer of you joining the organization day one, right? If you start understanding people within the organization, you don't have to use it for your advancement, right? But if you start understanding people very early on, you start knowing how to because at the end of the day, let's be honest, right? And Steve said it very nicely, you never do anything alone. Gone are those days. You're constantly collaborating, right? So understanding how what you do impacts somebody else, and how that by changing a little thing, you might be able to help them more. How do you get the most out of other people starts at the most fundamental layer of you joining an organization. And it just keeps growing more and more important as you grow up in the business, right? I'm a big football fan, and I'm sorry for those of you all who don't support Manchester United. I'm not asking you all to support, but there's a book by Alex Ferguson called Leading, right? I suggest you guys go and read that book. It's an amazing book about some of the key things that he's done in terms of understanding people. And in that book, he speaks about how the higher up you go, and the more complex the organization becomes, the more important skill is your ability to understand people, and a lot less your knowledge about the technical journey of the job. Whether it be understanding football, understanding programming, understanding technology, learning how to teach, that becomes less an issue and more managing the organization. Right? The other thing that I want to highlight, and I'm jumping the gun, and I don't know how long we have, but I'm going to use this opportunity. Steve spoke about the first 10 years and then the next 10 years. Right? That is very, very important for graduates to understand. Right? Today, Brian, when you interview people, I don't know if you're getting this right, but we see a lot of people who don't understand that the peak of the mountain, i.e. the top jobs of the organization, needs tracking. You need to climb the mountain to be able to reach up there. You don't stand at the bottom of the mountain, look at the mountain, go, yeah, I want that, and then complain that you're not up there. And that's the resilience part that both of them keep talking about, right? To be able to keep grinding and pushing, and you will cut yourself, you will fall down, you get up again and keep going and keep going. And these are the behavior components that, because I know Brian, you moved it as AQ, but the resilience is a behavior trait, right? You've got to build that early on, and the more you build it early on, the easier it becomes for you to run a lot faster later. It's your launch pad, right? Resilience, and I really like how you've used it, Brian. Resilience, think about resilience as your launch pad in your organization. The faster you build it, the faster you grow in your organization. And it's not easy to build. Huh?
Yep, agreed. Thank you, Mr. Sharma. So I do want to touch base on the topic of soft skills and the interviewing skills. But before I touch on that, I do want to touch a little bit more on the fourth industrial revolution, which I think we have been discussing a little bit. So for those who don't know, The fourth industrial revolution refers to our current phase that we are going through of rapid technological growth. So to keep up with this growth, there are a few essential skills that people do need in the workplace these days, which includes having a growth mindset. So how important do you think it is to have that growth mindset?
Who would you like to answer?
Mr. Steve, how about we start with you?
Yeah, growth mindset. I think actually the point that I prepared for this actually was linked back to the one that I mentioned just now, which is the QR code thing is, right? So yeah, I think it's about growth mindset versus the fixed mindset, right? So like what I mentioned just now, so I told my friends that why don't you try this QR, great curiosity, people will scan, right? And also, but because of the fixed mindset, I think my friend are kind of like not like showing interest at all to learn about this new technology. So to him or to her, it's like, we don't know about this. We are not IT guys, and I don't think anyone will be interested to know about this. I don't think so. Anyone will scan on that, right? But I do agree that maybe he or she is right. We don't know because we have not tried that yet, right? But of course, I've seen some of my customers did follow the instruction. How successful? I think we have to check back with our customer change management team, right? But that was one suggestion that we were given. So right, we don't know whether in that company are people ready to even pick up the phone and scan or not. Honestly, we don't have that data, right? But because they have the fixed mindset, they are not ready to even try that out. So yeah, so I think that is very important to have the growth mindset so that you don't be afraid to learn about everything, to try everything, right? If you fail, you just have to get up and continue trying, right? With other methods, right? So that is how we have been doing also. Previously, we have been hiring here in Malaysia also in the last, I think, couple of months, 3 months ago, right? That's when also I engaged with Help College to help me to get some fresh grads to join us also, right? Yeah, so we are trying to expand the company and even for us to hire in Malaysia, because like what I mentioned just now, in Malaysia, we have only roughly around 50 consultants who are experienced in this domain, right? So we try a lot of different ways. We try to get the recruiter to call them. We try to engage with agency. We try to use our CEO personally go and message all these 50 people. We try so many different ways, and every time that we fail, we try another method. We fail, we try another method, right? So it's not easy, yeah, honestly, because a lot of these 50 people are in some of the big 4 companies, and also, yeah, so it's really not easy. But what I'm trying to say is that the kind of like never say no to try any potential methods, right? So that is the kind of growth mindset that we should have rather than having a fixed mindset. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Mr. Steve. Mr. Brian?
All right. So I think what do the men and women in the military, what do long distance elite athletes, and what do your passionate managers, directors, and executives in your company have in common? I think resilience. So I'm a big advocate of resilience because I am a huge fan of failing, because I think I'm an expert at it already at this point. I think everyone has to have it on tap. If you have resilience on tap and you're constantly taking it and using it to develop grit and resilience in your life, you can push yourself further than you've ever thought you could push yourself before. So regardless of all the medals, the bonuses, the salary, the recognition that you get from whatever endeavors you're doing, that idea of a growth mindset is what drives people to go further. Growth mindset is basically overlooking all the lower level motivations that are trying to push and drive you, and then seeing growth itself as the peak of whatever you're doing. So no matter what you're doing, no matter what sports you're doing, what activity you're doing, where you're working, what level you're holding within the company, if you develop this growth mindset, this growth-driven mindset, you will overlook all the little menial motivations and focus on the bigger picture, which is at the end of the day to grow, to be the better version of the person that you were before. So always constantly looking to grow. And I think that is built from a foundation of grit and resilience.
That's quite interesting. Mr. Sharma? Mr. Sharma, you're muted.
So I'll use the term called incremental improvements, right? So there's a sports team. So I cycle, I play football, I swim, I play badminton, I do everything, but I'm not good at any one of these, right? But so there's a cycling team that I follow, right? And the entire premise, and they win a lot all the time, right? And the entire premise is incremental gains, right? So in cycling, you save watts, you try and beat people by seconds, right? And it's that improvement by seconds that you're trying to get day by day. So I think everything we have spoken about from the start is about growth mindset, not being stagnant. And the culmination of this, in my mind, is this logic of incremental improvement. Every day, better than yesterday. That if that is the journey you can start taking, then you will eventually grow. Just don't worry about other people. Don't worry about your teammates. Don't worry about other companies. Many people come and look at me and say, do you not look at your competitors? Are you not worried about what they do? The two things I keep talking about, right? The rate of innovation internally. So whether it be person or individual, and incremental improvements. If these two things become your mantra, you are automatically growing.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma. I always believe that growth mindset is very important to have. So hearing your perspective and your points are really helpful. So I would like to, again, go back to soft skills, which you have mentioned before as well. So I just wanted to ask, how important do you think it is to have soft skills at the work? And do you think that it is still important to evaluate one's soft skills during the interviews or during the hiring process compared to the other skills that a person can have? Mr. Brian, can we start with you?
Sure. I think when we look at the evolution of the industrial revolutions, so we start off with mechanization, then we went into assembly lines and mass production. So now more than ever, again, I think Mr. Sharma had this earlier, we are all now the Android today, we're electronics basically. So we have, from that previous mentality of us being just pieces of cogs in a machine, we are now turning away from that. So typically last time we are just assets to a company. Now we are thinking tools to a company. So I think that's where soft skill comes into play. Looking at the evolution of IR, soft skills may be more important now more than ever, because regardless of what you write on your CVs and your certificates, your hard skills, people skills are much more important. Communication is much more important. Knowing how to manage a team, assessing how and when to communicate properly is now more necessary than ever. I'm highly generalizing here, but skills is basically what I think of as doability. Soft skills is the reliability and the character of the person. So high skills and low reliability is not good, no bueno, because you're basically going to regret hiring this person. And low of both is definitely a big no-no. So means you are very low in doability, you're very low in personality, in character. Having high skills and high character, that's hitting the spot. This is a good hire. But the thing is, there's also things to consider. If this person has high doability, high character, I think his asking will be very, very high. But what's perfect is actually someone with low doability and high reliability and character. If this person has the soft skills and basically the resilience, everything that we've been talking about, the growth mindset, that good character, no matter how little he knows, this person is able to mold and fix himself into any condition, any position that you put him into. So if you want to find the perfect fit for a person in any company, you can never find the perfect fit. There is no perfect candidate. There is no perfect person. All of us here who are fresh graduates, the reason why most companies actually like hiring fresh graduates is because of moldability. We all don't have that specific shape. And we're not rigid. We are. Yep, correct. Okay, I think I'm done.
Thank you for sharing, Mr. Brian. Mr. Sharma?
So I think, like I said earlier, right, number one, I don't believe there's a difference between hard skills and soft skills. I think these are all skills, right? So the behavior component of your skill far surpasses any technical capability you have. Research after research, and I'm sure there's a bunch of psychology students here. You go and look at all the research available, right? Hundreds and thousands of researchers have gone and shown, right, that culture and behavior constantly trumps capability. Brian, you've got your model. I use the can do, will do model, right? Can do is your technical capability, will do is your behavior component, right? And you see throughout the biggest, I think the world's biggest organization is the military. And the US military, there's a book called Team of Teams. Right, so go and check that out. A very interesting book by a former general who looks at how to reshape organizations. Right, so in that book, he speaks of the Navy SEALs are the most elite of all the organizations within the military, and under the Navy SEALs, the Navy SEAL Team 6 is the most elite. Right? So when they are deciding how to move someone into Navy SEAL Team 6, now you have to understand the shooting capability of every Navy SEAL team member is already extremely high. They're all on 99th percentile, right? Similar with any sports person, right? Knowing how to kick a ball is not what I look at when I'm, trying to decide whether Real Madrid or Manchester United or Liverpool, whatever it is. But at that level, what they look for beyond the performance is also, and the behavior is also, trustworthiness. Right? And this is something we're trying to research a bit more in Ascendo, how to imbue trustworthiness as a function of performance enhancer within an organization, right? So I need to be able to trust the people that can do this. The way the military say it, right, is, I either need to trust that you will pick me up from the battlefield, which is everyone's job, or I trust that I can leave my wife with you, right? And that's the journey in which they go with, right? So a lot of the times, the general was talking about, we much rather somebody who's at the lower 99.9th percentile of performance, but much higher on trust than any technical capability. So as you come into this journey, understand that no matter what you do, skills are constantly changing. The core behavior elements never do, and that's what really distinguishes somebody over time. And that's the thing, right? Over time, over the 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years of your work environment, you need to build this journey. So whether you want to call it soft skills or behaviors or all these things, I think this is the bedrock of who you are at work. And the more you build around those journeys, the better you get.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma. Mr. Steve?
Yeah. So I think for my current job, right, it's very important to have soft skill, because like what I mentioned, I think basically most of the points are actually linked to each other, right? So like what I mentioned just now, that we need to do a lot of engagement with customers and also with our own staff, right? So soft skills tend to come out to a very important point, that we are able to kind of communicate well with people, the way that our body language, our tone is giving the comfort to the audience, to our business partners, to our customers, to our colleagues, right? So yes, because we are in consulting firm, we are a service line, right? So we need to service customers. So to us, the soft skill is a very key element. So I would say maybe 60-40, 60 will be technical skill, 40 will be these soft skills. Because in the end, if my consultant cannot handle customer, they shout at customer, the first person who get the call will be me, right? They will call me and say, hey, your consultant are shouting at me, right? We are the customer, we pay you, so that kind of debate will happen. So the soft skill is very important in consulting line, right? So we are trained to be able to take up a lot of stress and a lot of argument from customer. We need to respond in a polite way because we are in service line. Just like when if you are working in Malaysia airline or something, in the hotline, right? People call and shout at you, and you have to be patient. So that is how we are being trained to be, right? It's not easy, but it's one of the key competency that we have to have, right? Yeah.
Yep, I agree. I totally agree. So we do have a few questions from the participants that I would like to ask now. So the first question that I found quite interesting is, I think we mentioned empathy training among future doctors at some point during this conversation. So following the mention of empathy training among future doctors, how much do you personally trust the use of personality tests to help in the process of hiring? So Mr. Steve, can we continue with you?
You are talking about, so can you repeat again the question? I don't quite get it.
Yeah, so I think the question is basically asking, how much do you personally trust the use of personality tests to help in the hiring process of individuals?
Wow, okay. Personally, I only trust maybe 30%. So if you ask me the weightage for this test result, usually is, especially on this kind of competency test, I will rate it 30% maybe, right? And the other 70% usually come from technical tests and also the interview itself. Because we know the answer, right? If I give you a question like, if customer shout at you, would you A, shout back, B, be patient, you know, the kind of answer, definitely you will tell me, be patient. But in real life, are you able to handle that or not? That is a different story. So that we, of course, first we will try to assess it during interviews. So sometimes it may not be able to achieve that. Then we just have to assess it during the probation period. But yeah, I trust usually around 30% of the competency test result. But if the technical one, then I trust 100% because technical you cannot cheat, right?
That is true. You cannot cheat on a technical test. How about you, Mr. Brian?
I totally agree with what Steve said. With any tests, even when we were doing our thesis, when we were giving out questionnaires to students to answer, there's that little leeway they have to give that almost like 30% of them would lie in their test. They would try and make themselves seem a lot nicer, or whatever it is, depending on the questionnaire. Yeah, so I think we take everything that people say with a grain of salt. And when it comes to questionnaires like this, I think they're a good tool. I think they definitely streamline and make the hiring process much more easier as a recruiter myself. But I think everything with a grain of salt. Still, the interview process, the face-to-face talking, face-to-face communication, we would definitely be able to determine more.
I agree. I definitely agree with you on the thesis part. You do not know whether they're going to be truthfully honest, like 100%, or whether they're kind of tweaking it a little bit to make themselves look better. Mr. Sharma, how about you?
So Sando lives, breathe through psychometrics. So let me give a more scientific answer to this journey, right? Number one, personality questionnaires are not a function of competence, it's a function of preference. So anybody who uses a personality questionnaire to try and understand capability, you're using it wrongly, right? That's just point number one. So if you're trying, just because I say high on influence does not mean I'm good at influence. It technically just means I've got a stronger natural preference for influence. What then you've got to validate during your interview is the context in where this comes from. That's number one. Number two, you use assessments as a function of measurement, and assessments typically get used only for two things: process efficiency and talent differentiation. And when you're using it for recruitment, high volume, you're trying to screen in for potential. And when you've got smaller groups, you're trying to differentiate talent. So understanding psychometrics is very, very important. I think if you don't mind, I'm getting a bit technical here because we've been doing this for many, many years. And I'm not saying one is better than the other. But when you know how to use psychometrics, The combined usage of psychometrics brings up its validity to about, I think, 0.5, 0.6 PC equals almost 75%. Right. So, when you understand the science behind it and you understand the good, robust tools that are out there and you know how to use it properly and you understand. So let me give you this, right? People talk about interviews. I've seen so many very senior interviewers who say, the guy walks in 5 minutes, I know if he's good already. I shake his hand, I know if he's good already. All of this is implicit bias, right? We think we are very good at making decisions. The human mind is terrible at making decisions, whether it be through decision fatigue, whether it be through our experiences, whatever it is, right? Example, Brian's the only other one here who's wearing glasses. So I think Brian and I are brilliant, smart people, and the two of you all are terrible. Right? Example, right? But that's because there's a similarity between Brian and I. So I'm searching for someone who's similar to me. So I think knowing how to use, there are many tools out there beyond personality tools, right? Or beyond psychometric assessment. There are many things out there that can measure people. Knowing how to use it properly, being mature about it. And I think the bigger stretch is do not reduce people to a number. Right, we're huge proponents of measurement, but the one thing I hate is when people reduce an individual to a single number. Oh, Sharma's a 3, Brian's a 4, so 4 is better than this. That's not how it works. So all these things are out there to help, but like any tool, if you don't know how to use it, it becomes a terrible. Remember my PPT, people process technology. This is the technology. Right? So if you don't know what you're doing, if you don't have the right people implementing the right processes to understand the technology, the outcome of your technology is a lot more inefficient. So just be very careful. I'm a huge proponent of psychometrics and any other kind of measurement, right? Because it gives you the kind of insight that you're searching for. Right? It helps you with trying to understand how to interview somebody better. It helps you with trying to probe and drive further conversations, be a lot more specific. But a lot of the examples I'm hearing is, I use it as an absolute. And when you start using it as an absolute, it becomes a very, very dangerous line to walk.
That does make sense. Like you shouldn't be using that as like an absolute thing for interviews. And since we're on the topic of hiring, a question by one of the participants is, may I know how to make a good first impression on an interviewer when applying for non-major IT jobs that require IT skills, especially if I lack of an IT background? Mr. Brian, I think you mentioned that you were a recruiter or you do some recruiting, and I know that you're also a psych student. So may I know your opinion or thoughts on this?
Okay, I think a good cover letter makes a big difference. Having a nice cover letter, a good introduction. First things first, I think introducing your name, your age, where you come from, what you've been doing before this, what did you study, it's so important. A lot of candidates that actually apply to the jobs that I'm doing. So I'm hiring for HQ side and I'm also hiring for the outlet side. So for outlets, you have the retail assistants, you have the lower grade jobs. And then for HQ side, you have more of the manager roles, you have more executive roles. And executive roles, a tendency that I see is Malaysians, we are not very good at introducing a job. I'm jobless now. I need job. And then I'm over there like, okay, could you give me a resume? Could you tell me about yourself? Could I give you a call and then we could probably discuss this further? But besides that, I think I don't know anything much about IT and hiring for IT. But what I can tell you to make a first good impression is the way you upbring yourself. Make sure that you come for the interview well-dressed, well-mannered. You don't have to come in with very expensive clothes. Just come in well-groomed, because when you're well-groomed, then we know that you are a candidate that actually will take care of yourself and will take care of the company as you work with us. And always be on time. Don't do the Malaysian timing of, oh, I'm on the way, I am late, I had acted. Be original, be yourself, And I think that should be good enough to already make a good impression. Next up is to show your character. Why you, as someone who don't have IT background, would actually be able to learn within the company. Because if I want to invest in you, someone who doesn't know anything about IT, I want to know that you are willing to learn, you're willing to take on anything that I put you up to, and you're willing to grow into that space. Because if you're someone who doesn't know IT, you're expecting me to teach you, but you have to take you on as a recruiter. So I wouldn't even consider you. Yeah. So that's my 2 cents on that. I am not very experienced in recruiting, so take my words with a grain of salt. Yeah.
I just want to add one point there is based on my personal experience, I've seen candidates that when they come in, they do a very lengthy introduction. I think a lot of, especially business leaders and all, right, they want a very short and sweet introduction. Like, let's say I have 15 years of work experience in IT, and specifically in, let's say, finance IT or HR IT, I have 4 years experience, for example, something like that, and specialize in this Oracle, for example, right? So that kind of introduction, then I think that will make a very good impression compared to first you started, I started my job 15 years ago, so initially I work on web, then after that I changed to my second job. So usually business leader, they want to see a summary at the top. Then later when they ask, you can get into details, but give a very short and sweet introduction.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Steve. Mr. Sharma, anything you would like to add on to that?
I think, and I assume that this person who was asked this question is a graduate. So the advantage you have is in a world where today everybody is on this one-click application. Many candidates don't even know what job they've applied for, because they go on to one of these platforms and just click apply, and hope somebody calls, right? So if you're genuinely looking for a business, understand what value you bring to them. That is be genuine, be good. Everything Brian said, everything Steve said, right? But know what value you bring to them. Steve said, leadership don't like lengthy conversations. It's not they don't like lengthy conversations. They want to be able to understand, how to be succinct. Being succinct is a capability of understanding how to bring out the most important points at the most important time. You're going to have an hour with this person, half an hour with this person. You've got time to know how to bring these conversations in. But knowing when to bring, what to bring is equally important. I think they've said most of it, but I just say really know what value you bring to them. Be succinct and genuinely research the business a little bit. If you are one of those that apply for 100 different jobs, then you really don't know what you're looking for, right? But if you know what you're looking for, then have Brian spoke about cover letters. Have specific cover letters. Please don't send cover letters that say things like, I'm a high energy person looking for a job in a company that can do this, right? We know when we read a cover letter like that, when my recruiters, when they read these things, you're sending this to the mass, right? So I'm not interested in somebody who wants a job. And I think Alex Ferguson again said this very nicely. I want people who want to die for Manchester United. And the same logic applies, right? That if I don't need you to die for Ascendo, but at least, when you put enough effort into the process, I know you're willing to go that much further. These are part of, we spoke earlier about psychometrics and personality tests. These are all part of the measurement components that build up to who you are as an individual, right? So some simple practical things like that, I think will really help.
I think to add on to that as well, I think when it comes to screening candidates, I also want candidates who screen me basically as a company, like basically looking and doing some research into the company, as Mr. Sharma said, look into the values of the company, look into who is leading the company, see if there's any articles written on the company, see if you can find the Glassdoor for the company, see if you can look at the LinkedIn for the company, because only then can I know that, this candidate actually looked into my company, looked into my culture and saw that, hey, this is a place that I think I would fit in. Because if you are applying to 100 and then just spamming your cover letters everywhere, it's basically saying that you just want a job, you don't care what job, you don't care about the company, and you're just here to get that salary at the end of the month, which is not something that I think any of the hiring managers, any of the bosses, any of the recruiters would want. So do your research and, like I said, look for the value of the company and see what you can bring to the company.
Thank you, Mr. Brian. So thank you for the speakers for sharing your thoughts and opinions on those questions. We are kind of running out of time. We actually did run out of time. We're kind of going above it. But I think one last question that I do want to ask you is, what advice would you like to give those that are freshly graduating or that are looking for jobs right now? Mr. Steve, can we start with you first?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand what you really want to achieve, and do sufficient research about the job role and the company that you are going to apply for, right? So I give you one example, like I personally, I came from consulting before. I came from end user before. I think to a lot of fresh graduates, this is something that they may not have even thought about it, right? So end user is like, let's say you're joining Topgraph or some other company, Petronas, whereby they are kind of like an end user. They are using, let's say you are, for example, you are an IT guy or you're a HR guy. So you join Petronas as a HR or Petronas as an IT, right? For example. So that is an end user environment whereby you serve your employees. At the same time, you deal with vendors, right? Who provide the services of maybe payroll outsourcing or the HR system implementation and all, right? So you deal with your vendors, right? So that is what we call end user environment. In consulting, whereby it's the role that I'm currently holding, that we deal with different customers. So what is the difference between end user and consulting is that end user, being in end user side, I learn the best practices in this industry. For example, I'm in Petronas, I know how oil and gas run HR department. Let's say I'm a HR there, right? But if you are in consulting world, like HR consulting, like growing a race, right? What we learn is that within 1 year, generally we have 3 to 5 projects. So I will get to learn how Petronas do the HR processes, how other companies, like for example, Aeon or Cellcom, Messis, run the HR department. So basically within 1 year, I can learn how 3 to 5 companies run their HR departments. Within 5 years, I will learn more than maybe, I don't know, 20 companies, how they run the HR processes. So in the sense, I'm kind of like a expert in terms of HR processes in different industry, different domain, different area, right? But if I'm end user compared to someone who have been there in end user, let's say Petronas for 5 years, this person will be the industry expert in terms of oil and gas HR, right? How the HR runs the business in the oil and gas domain, right? So that is a different area. So whether you want to get exposed to so many different businesses and become a consultant, you're able to go out and advise people how to run the HR department, or you prefer to learn how one industry run the HR processes. So I mean, that is the 2 different areas, consulting versus end user. So be clear which one that is the track that you want to move on, and then pick the right job. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Mr. Steve. Mr. Brian?
All right. So I think as a fresh graduate myself, who graduated last year, coming into the working world was very intimidating. It was very scary. But I think one advice I would give is don't overthink it. Don't overthink about the where, the how, and the why. Where should I start my career journey? How should I design my future in the way that I want to reach blah, blah, blah by 5 years? How should I take on this career? What are the methods that I can do to approach these companies? These are all very good and valid things to think on, to worry about, but instead start doing instead of thinking. If you know exactly what you want to do in life after you graduate, then great. Then start doing what you can do to get to where you want to be. If you say, oh, I know I'm going to be in the oil and gas industry, I know I'm going to be in the sports industry, I'm going to be a sports psychologist, find the specific companies that are good at it, look at which company you would choose to want to do your, to pursue your future in. If you say that you don't know what you want to do yet, then start by just simply doing things. Do some part-timing in different industries, in different places. Start doing some internships here and there. maybe try interning in 3 different type of companies, 3 different industries, and see if that tickles your fancy. Volunteer at NGOs, see what really sparks up your passion, where you want to go, which direction you feel that, find your passion, find your direction in life, basically. But whatever it is, just start doing, because that's what builds up your character. And I think your character is the most important when it comes to a career. You need to know what you are good at, what you want to do, and what values you want to bring to the world. And from there, you will know your where, how, and why better. So I think I think you as fresh graduates listening on to this, or anyone else that will be listening in the future, give any one of us a call. Give Mr. Sharma a call, give Steve a call, give me a call. We are all very, very, I think we have a bit of experience already. Me, maybe not so much, but as a fresh graduate, I think I'll be able to guide you as well on like where I think you would best fit. But Mr. Sharma and Mr. Steve definitely know exactly how to guide you in the right direction. I think the most important is to give people a call and discuss on this. Don't overthink it on your own.
Thank you, Mr. Brian. Mr. Sharma, what is your advice?
As a graduate, don't pick the company, pick your boss. Right. You are going to most likely end up being like the first 2 or 3 bosses that you have. So who you pick in this journey is going to be extremely crucial. And this is a function of, the people you face when you interview. So, my biggest advice is always, because think of your career in many different cycles, right? You're not going to join a company and stay there for 10 years, 15 years. If you do, then so be it, right? But as you think about your cycles, you can always move into a company later in a different stage. But once you mold who you are, then it's difficult to start changing. So your first experience should be with a boss who's willing to grow you. And I think that's the most important criteria. As a graduate, when you're looking for a job, you're looking for somebody who's willing to spend the time, resource, and effort to develop you. I had the huge privilege of working with some really amazing bosses. And this may not necessarily be my full-time career bosses, right? These were people, I think like Brian said, when I was in college, I did some part-time work, and I learned so much from the people that ran the business there. When I was in university, I worked in a cinema, and I learned so much from that there. So you're looking for environments that you're constantly absorbing knowledge. So as a graduate, your boss, not your company.
That is a very good advice. I think this is the last question that is from the floor, that I feel is related to this. So what is your advice for a person who maybe does not love his or her job very much, but still has to do the job? Mr. Sharma? Yeah.
I'll give two very famous stories, right? And when you go to B school, there's a very famous story about, I think, I could be wrong, didn't pay attention in school, but I think it was the launch of Apollo 11, right? One of these consultants walked into the washroom, washing his hand. There was a janitor there. Now, let me stop the story there and say, look, nobody in their life grows up wanting to be a janitor, right? Circumstances, whatever the reason, this person was the janitor. So as this gentleman was washing his hand, he looked at the janitor. Mind you, this guy was a management consultant, right? Helping NASA figure out this launch. He looked at this guy and said, what do you do for a job? He looked at him, smiled, and he said, I send people to the moon, right? Purpose is not built by the activity in which you build your job. Purpose is built by how you connect to the organization. There's another wonderful story of this nurse, another cleaner who cleans the coma wards in a hospital, right? And she was caught one day switching paintings from one room to another. Right? She wasn't stealing the paintings, she was switching paintings. And they caught her and they asked her, well, what are you doing? She said, I'm switching the paintings. She said, why? She said, I don't want them to get bored of the same painting. And they said, you know, you work in a coma ward, right? They said, you never know, right? So you find purpose in anything that you do. You know, I don't, very few people have the luck to be able to, you know, find what they do and their life purpose in the same thing, right? Very few people have that opportunity. But you find purpose in everything you do. You create your own purpose, you create your own reality. So I think in that sense, you know, it's the smaller things that we do that culminate to this achieving purpose. If your purpose is helping people out, then find a way to help everybody around you in your job. If your purpose is, whatever your purpose is, you find a way to make it the reality for you at your job.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma. Mr. Steve?
That's a tough question though. I think, yeah, I think a lot of time, whether we like it or not in the industry that we are doing, right? Because certain job that when you, as you move up, right, after a while, and let's say you figure out that you don't like that job that much, right? I do have a friend, is a live example. She has been working as a HR for like 5 years, I think. Yeah, 6 years, I think. Or no, I think more than that, 7, 8 years, I think. And because of that, I think the salary had come to a certain stage, right? And she came to realize that she doesn't like HR that much, right? She wanted to try something else. But because she has so many commitment and all, so she couldn't do all those, like, she loved to do arts, and she loved to teach arts about, right? So if she wanted to basically open up maybe an art shop or something like that, or even go to some art studio to do teaching and all, right? But she figured out that the pay is too low and she has so many commitments and all. So what she have done is that she did it on a part-time basis, right? During weekend, she go and run some of this, solely not because of the income or what, but solely to do something that she likes. But she still have a day job for her living, right? So I think that's how it is, like, that's the reality, right?
Thank you for sharing that, Mr. Steve.
No problem.
Mr. Brian, are you still with us?
Yes, I am. I believe that my screen is frozen, I think.
We're good now. We're good now.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
All right. So sorry, I think there's a Wi-Fi drop. Okay, wait. So
It's
the
all right.
question was, what do I do if I am in a job then I'm stuck with and I cannot find my purpose or like find joy in it? Is it right?
Yep. So what is your advice for a person who does not love his or her job very much, but they still have to do that job?
All right. So my lovely director of my company, she basically gave me a book last week. The title of the book is Fish. It's by, I think, Stephen C. If I'm not mistaken, I will check on it again, the exact book title, and type it out here. But this book basically highlights how, I think, again, there's two ways of approaching this. You either try and slowly find passion and find direction in whatever job you're doing. Know that whatever job you're doing, no matter what grade it is, there is a purpose, there is a reason for you being there, and then finding joy in seeing that you are doing something important for the world. Every job is important. There's no such thing as menial tasks, menial jobs. We shouldn't judge people based on the jobs that they're doing. But I think this book highlights a very important thing. It's that, again, like picking the director of a company when you're a fresh graduate, picking the company for its culture as well is important. If this company is a very fun company to work with, a very joyful company to work with, you will find joy in any job that you do. Trust me. This book basically highlights fishmongers in a fish market that are basically selling, I'll let you guys read the book yourself, but basically what it highlights is that find joy and find fun in whatever you do. If you're able to do that, whatever condition, whatever job that you're doing, you're going to be able to find joy in it. You're going to be able to wake up every morning and say, hey, it's time for me to go to work and I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to love it. And you're going to be able to keep doing that. But if you're stuck in, for example, a department or a company that isn't as fun, it's up to your own responsibility to bring out that fun and bring out that joy. So just try your best and have fun in whatever you do. I know it sounds easy, but read the book and you will be inspired. Trust me, it definitely tickles the thinking brain. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Ryan. So I think we are nearing the end of our webinar. So once again, I would like to thank all three of you speakers for taking part in this webinar and sharing your thoughts and opinions. It was very insightful to me, and I'm very sure to all of the participants as well. And to all of the participants, thank you so much for taking your time on a Saturday during lunch to come and join the webinar and to share your questions and share your thoughts as well. So I think we will end our webinar here. Thank you so much for attending, and hopefully see you in our next webinar that we will have. And thank you again to Mr. Sharma, Mr. Brian, and Mr. Steve for sharing your thoughts and opinions.
No, I want to thank you all also. I think I enjoyed it as much. I learned so much from everybody here. So thank you.
Yeah,
Likewise,
thanks
it's an
everyone.
honor. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go
No,
ahead.
go ahead, Brian.
Oh, no worries. You go ahead first.
Yeah, no, I just want to say thank you, and also I want to share this with all the fresh graduates here that we do have a program, training program, which is a hiring program. So sorry for marketing time. So yeah, we do hire fresh graduates and provide training. It's up to the 3 months training, on the job training, right? So of course, it's not a trainee program that you don't get paid or what. We are paying you a full package, right? During the training time, 2 to 3 months time, and we are going to deploy you into different HR implementation projects, right? So we do HR consulting, we do HR system implementation. So if you're into HR or into IT grads or even psychology grads, please feel free to come to me or go to my company website, roaringarrays.com, and apply the job from there. Thanks.
Nice. All right. Cool. So I just want to say that it's a great honor to be alongside Mr. Sharma, Mr. Steve, and also thank you, Ambika, for having us. I'm so sorry it dragged on longer than it should. And thank you everyone for
problem.
being here. It was a very fun session. I would love to come back and have this again.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. See
Take
you.
care.
All right.
Take care. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye, everybody.